With other subordinates, however, Lee was less successful. Certainly Longstreet was successful on other occasions. Certainly Stuart was. Certainly Hill was. Certainly Ewell was. And all the other people whose actions seem to have contributed, been part of that fabric of Confederate defeat. But they were unsuccessful in this case for the very reason that they were successful at other times. Because Lee's whole style of leadership was to select the best possible subordinates, give them the most freedom possible, bring them to the right place at the right time, and simply hope that they would do the right thing. And this, I think, is really what Gettysburg was about, what Lee's defeat was about. I think one of Lee's great virtues was his capacity to cope with frustration, with adversity, and with defeat. And in the wake of Gettysburg, he certainly kept his army together. He even infused greater morale among the men when he stood and, in effect, dared Meade to come and attack him. He would fight great battles later in his career as Confederate commander and commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. He was able to pull his army together, take it back into Virginia, and make it again, eventually, that formidable force that it had been before. But Lee's analysis of the war, I think, proved correct. That is, his army was going to get progressively weaker while the enemy would get progressively stronger in numbers of troops and in the capacity to supply those troops.
Pickett's next chance to make up for the fiasco at Gettysburg, to prove himself again as a commander, comes in February 1864 when he's heading up the Department of North Carolina. And what's significant about this is he failed another military expedition. He's supposed to retake the city of New Bern, and he fails. But he ends up capturing some North Carolinian men that had joined the Home Guard in North Carolina and switched to the Union when conscription came. The Confederacy enacted conscription. And he captures these men and he sets up a court-martial and quickly moves to have them hanged, about 20 men. He actually brings them to the town where a lot of them are from, has them hanged in front of their wives. It's a very dramatic and intense episode of the Civil War in general, so much so that later Pickett is almost tried for war crimes. An actual court of inquiry is set up, and a judge wants Pickett arrested. Pickett runs to Canada and lives there. It's unclear how long, but for at least a year, living under an assumed name, cuts his hair that had been his pride. His wife works teaching piano, and he's so ill physically that he spends days bedridden. After this happens, this whole fiasco in North Carolina, he wants very badly to have his division back. And up to that point, the remainder of his division had just been broken up. And he gets it back in the summer of 1864. He rejoins Longstreet and rejoins the Army of Northern Virginia and Lee. And I'm sure he felt that maybe it was a second chance. But the summer of 1864 brings the siege of Petersburg, and the war is winding down. And at the Battle of Five Forks, he again fails, so much so that Lee removes him from command. And that's the final chapter as far as the Civil War for George Pickett.
Davis settled down for the long war. He had to believe that this long war was what would happen, and he had to be ready for it. If it didn't happen, well, that's so much the better. But he was ready to fight as long as the United States had the will to come down and try to conquer the Confederacy. He miscalculated very gravely the will of the United States. And probably the reason the United States won the Civil War was that Americans were enthusiastic enough and were strong enough in their conviction that the Union had to be maintained. The Union as a vehicle for maintaining a mission for this country, for continuing humanitarian reform, that is the abolition of slavery, and to encourage the growth of industrial capitalism to power and progress.